All right, we are going to continue. Our goal this session is to get the first layer of bone on all of the big nids down to the two dimacarons. Well, really just one of the dimacarons. And then some touch-ups on both of the Moloch and the Trigon, and then on the Hive Tyrant. And that'll give the first layer of bone all the way down. Then we'll move on to the second layer. Yeah, I mean, really a good goal today might be to finish up the bone. If we could do that, that would be pretty great. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
And we did that, on purpose. It was like, if we can show it and not have anybody say it, that's actually more powerful. Because now we're watching a human reaction to it. Not everything has to be verbalized, and often it's better if it isn't.
And speaking of Mum, we reunited with Sarah Connor on page 9, and the same way that you sought to do something quite surprising with Arnold's character, Sarah here, as we discussed, is not the same person that we met in the first film.
You see her doing pull-ups on a bed that she's put, vertical. And one of the things, I think Jim had this conversation with, like, A, do you want to be in the movie? Okay. B, since you just said yes, you're going to have to, you're not going to be the soft, fluffy-haired, waitress from the first one, because here's what would have happened to you over the years. So she worked out for months. Now, we got her a trainer. I think he was an Israeli commando, as I recall, and or a former one maybe. And she just got shredded. She got so ripped up. She looked fantastic, And there's a still that runs around the internet all the time, and it's Sarah sitting at the table cleaning an AR-15 or M16 or something. She's got, a tank top on, her hair back in a ponytail, and those sunglasses. And it's like, oh, my heart be still. Part of what's fun about making films and writing them and so forth is you can create some of your own fantasies. It's like, she's like always in a bad mood, and she's cranky, and she's kind of crazy, and all of it. Set that aside. It's like, okay, let's create like the coolest girlfriend you could have. She happens to be a bit mad, but nobody's perfect. And I really got a kick out of being able to do that, not just on this film, but in other films. You create characters that you like to know, or be like, or what have you, And I love that image of Sarah Connor, And then the whole thing, if there is no fate but what you make, ran through both films, was really stepped on hard in T2. And it's a thing that Jim and I completely agree on. And that was a very strong theme of the film, that they screwed up in a bunch of subsequent sequels, where they kind of let that go. But the whole point of Terminator, T1 and T2 are almost like part 1 and part 2 of the same movie in some ways, because they're thematically the same. And the idea of human will conquering, being stronger than any sort of AI or computer or that sort of thing, was central to the whole concept of the film, and I think is the strongest theme that runs through it. Like, if you see that movie and you walk away with anything, please walk away with human will is the strongest thing in the universe, and fate is a thing you decide for yourself. You create your own fate, and that's a terribly important part of the movie to me.
And one of the biggest drivers of human will is family, the sort of desire to protect and the people you love, which is why it seems to tie in so well that this is a movie about family.
Well, and it all just kind of fit together. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why we were able to do it so quickly. Also, Jim and I, here's the deal. If you were to introduce me to a stranger, I don't care how talented they are, tomorrow, and say you have 6 weeks to work with this co-writer and director, I don't know if that could be done, or certainly not done as well. But we're talking about, someone by that time that I'd known since 1973, and now it's 1990. And we spent a lot of time together, and we grew up in the business together. We kind of, broke in, crowbarred in, at the same time. And So we had very common language. So I never had to say, if he would say something, I never have to say, oh, no, wait, now what does that, what do you mean by that? I knew what he meant by that. And vice versa. If I said something, he knew exactly what I meant by that. And so we didn't have to spend any time getting to know each other and kind of going like, well, where are you coming from? And where are you coming from? And all of that had happened years and years and years ago. So when we sat down to do it, the way we approached stories and all of that was already pretty well precinct up, and so it allowed us to do it that quickly, and because we just already had agreed on most things, and some things. You may not anticipate, but just about how the process works. We didn't have to argue about that. We both had the same approach to the process already. So that was an important piece of how it happened. And all those things just worked together. There is no fate but what you make. What she carves, I think, no fate into the table before she goes up to the dice and doesn't do the whole sentence, but it appears in the film. Several times before that, as I recall. And so you know what it is. He's, oh my God, she's going to go kill him. And of course she gets there and she can't really, and that's the moment where she stops pretending she's a Terminator. She's still in a bad mood. I remember we were writing the scene, and once Dyson, I think she wounds him. But when she walks up and she's ready to put a round right to his head, and she cannot do it because she's human after all, and that's when she kind of realizes that, and anyway, so then they're sitting in the kitchen a few minutes later, and Dyson is being explained, all the work you think that you're doing that's for good is really going to be for evil, And then she launches into this thing like, you men, you can't create anything. All you know how to do is destroy. And she's this whole kind of short little monologue where she's just and she's smoking a cigarette, talking, you men are bad, and this and that. And the kid goes, Mom, lighten up here, okay? It's not helping. And so, we had all these dynamics kind of playing out, overlapping each other, intertwining with each other, and it just worked, I think, wonderfully well. As I said at the very beginning of this whole thing, I'm very proud of that. Everything in it worked, and I can't think of a thing. Even now, looking at it, there's no moment where I go, oh, I wish we hadn't done it. It all seemed to work. It's like, wow, that still works. That's great. It's great.
And around all these amazing kind of emotional moments and moments of character development, we have these incredible action sequences. We have this scene in the mall where there's a wonderful actor playing a photographer. Just one of your many Terminator cameos. But there's also, and
there's two actually.
Do I remember you getting slammed into a cop car in the first one? Is that right?
Yeah, I played a cop whose call sign is 1L19. I don't think he had a name. I think we just referred to him as 1L19. And and I always thought, I'm not sure what it says in the script, but I always thought that Arnold kills that guy. Kind of breaks his neck when he slams him. And I worked with the stunt team and all of that, and we got padded up, and it all went beautifully. But it really looks like he's just breaking his neck, smashing the window. So I'm like, well, that guy's dead. And you cut to like 6 years later, and I get a phone call. I had no intention of being in T2 because I'd been in the intervening years. I mean, the reason I did it in the first one was I'd started out as an actor and never really got very far and didn't like the business of the business for actors. It's a real rough road.
Yeah.
And so I decided to turn myself into a writer. And in the intervening years, I was in Abyss. He put me in that, played a reporter. And but Jim's like, well, I'll get you SAG card. And I was like, yeah, why not? Handy to have. And I still have it to this very day. And but when T2 came around, I don't know how the discussion came up, but I was not going to be in it. I said I really don't want to be in it. Anyway, I'm dead. If it was a whole other movie, so it would just be weird, right? And he's like, all right, he couldn't talk. And so I got a phone call. They're shooting. That mall is actually two malls. It's Santa Monica Place, the old one that existed at that time. They completely terraformed it. And then I think the Sherman Oaks Mall or something. And the two things kind of get spliced together, so it looks like it's one location. So we actually shot the scene, the little cameo where I'm the guy with the camera in Santa Monica, and I was living nearby. And I got a call at night, the night before, and Jim says, I need you on set at 6 a.m. And I'm like, for what? He goes, I want you to play the guy with the camera. Now, he had gone to Japan, Jim had, for, a festival or an awards thing, something like that. And he made friends with this Japanese guy. And he was supposed to be, I think in the script it says Japanese tourist.
Yeah, that's right.
And at the last minute, and he was going to put his buddy in. It was Friday. Yeah, that'll be fun. And the guy, I don't know, he missed his plane. Something went sideways, and he couldn't get here. And so Jim calls me up, the night before and says, yeah, I need you on set at 6 a.m. To do what? He says, to play the Japanese tourist. And he goes, hey, don't argue with me. And I'm like, okay. And so, that was never intended to happen. It just kind of happened at the last minute. So I need a body with a camera, and it's going to be you. And okay. And so I don't have any lines or anything, but yeah, I ended up being in that way.
Well, you played the Japanese photographer very well, and yeah, that's in the midst of this incredible sort of mall.
I think I actually made a very poor Japanese photographer.
You played a great photographer, yeah.
Tourist with camera, yeah.
That moment is a fun little grace note in an astonishing action sequence in which John is being chased by one Terminator, only to run into another Terminator. The T-800 and the T-1000 have this incredible fight sequence in the mall, which eventually gives way to this chase. We're then torpedoed towards this kind of mini prison breakout movie almost in the middle of the film. Sarah Connor is trying to break out of the mental health facility that she's been held in. As that is going on, the T-1000 is converging on her location, as are John and the T-800. Can you tell me a bit about the construction of that scene, which is one of my favorites in the movie?
Well, it made sense that she'd want to break out and go grab John Connor. I don't know if we ever said how long she'd been in there. I don't know if that comes up in the script, but my feeling was she'd been in there for a few months, and just no, I got to go find my son and get him, to safety. And so it's like, well, why don't we have her breaking out while they're breaking in? That'll just kind of shorten everything, And it gave us this wonderful opportunity to show how clever she had become over the years. She gets out her handcuffs and all that kind of stuff. It was all leading up to this one moment, which is Sarah's nightmare moment, where she's jogging down the hallway looking for a way to get out of there. And she sees Arnold walking up to her. And she does almost, like the Warner Brothers cartoon thing, where she slides to a stop and then starts backing away, like, oh no, and then John's like, no, he's basically, he's with us. He's a good guy. and I think we had the opportunity. I'm pretty sure that line's in there. Where we did the spin on the line from Terminator 1, where Kyle Reese says, "Come with me if you want to live." And Arnold, I think, says the same thing right back to her at that moment. He reaches out and grabs her hand. And it was just like, well, there's a nice symmetry to that. But I remember we're writing this, and the Dr. Silverman character, the most obnoxious psychiatrist in the world, is talking to her, and she's running around, and she grabs a syringe, and she opens up like a utility closet, and there's some like Drano and something in there, and she fills a syringe up with it. And I do remember that I thought that up. And, I mean, mostly it's just kind of like we, but in this one, I'm only saying this because there's kind of a funny little punchline about it. So we're like, well, God, what could she find, And I said, oh, yeah, well, what if she takes a syringe and jabs it into this, like, Drano thing, and then jabs it into Silverman's neck and says, do exactly what I say or I'll hit the plunger. I remember Jim looking at me going, like, you are one sick fuck. I love that. And we laughed. He's like, oh, yeah, that's great, And now I don't remember how she ends up in the hallway with Arnold, but she does, And there was another thing we put in there where the T-1000, I told you when the floor rose up, my floor rises up, and it appears like it's a CG shot with the two guards, identical guards. They're actually
it's a twin brother. Yeah.
And we saved a lot of money on that one. But there's a moment when the T-1000 is just walking through some like prison bars, okay, and he just kind of melts through them, okay, and he's got a pistol, and it's a 9mm Beretta, LAPD issued kind of gun, and as he's walking through, I remember saying, can we have it? Because we wanted to reinforce the fact that the T-1000 cannot make. He can make pointed weapons out of himself, but he can't make like gunpowder and shells and stuff like that, right? So the gun's a real gun that he takes off the cop. And to reinforce that, I said, when he's walking through there, can the gun for just a half a second kind of hit the side of one of the bars, and so we go, oh, that's actually not part of him. I remember Jim looking at me and saying, well, it doesn't make any sense because he would never let that happen. That gun would go smoothly between the two bars. He said, but it does reinforce the fact that it's not part of them. So let's do that, So some things that really, if you think about it, doesn't necessarily make sense, but cinematically it reinforces something else that you feel is important, so you want to put it in there anyway.
But it's interesting, Bill, after they help break Sarah out, help being the operative word there, because of course she's no damsel in distress anymore. She's in the midst of her own escape attempt when John and the Terminator happen upon her. That feels important to stress. So yeah, after that, the initial plan is to flee to Mexico, but then there's this U-turn. Sarah learns about Dyson, the man who essentially is going to go on and create Skynet. She senses an opportunity to stop the future from happening. She decides to basically assassinate this guy at his house, becoming in the process the very thing that she spent the entire first film fleeing from, the Terminator. So, Bill, Dyson is a super interesting character. It seems like a lot's being explored there. Some of the questions kind of quietly wrapped up in that guy are questions that we're still asking today. I mean, in the wake of what we've seen politically recently, people are asking what responsibility tech entrepreneurs have with creations of theirs that turn destructive. So in real life, it's social media moguls right now. In your film, it's an artificial intelligence engineer. Can you tell me about Dyson and what it was you wanted that character to bring to the film?
That's a really good question. Unlike the tech billionaires we have today, Dyson had a real conscience and an immense decency. Okay, which personally I think is way stronger than Zuckerberg's or any of these other guys. I think they're just looking to consolidate power for the sake of it. Dyson is a scientist. He's also, but you can tell by looking at his house, he's quite wealthy. We never say exactly how much, but he's not living in an apartment in Downey. He's got this beautiful kind of high-tech house in this lovely family. And what he thinks he's doing is something that will be good for the world. And he's one of my favorite characters in the movie. He's actually the closest thing to Jesus Christ in the movie. And so when they explain to him, everything, your entire life's work that you thought was going in one direction is going to be used to destroy mankind. It doesn't take him more than like 1 second to go, let's destroy my entire life's work, shall we? Right? I mean, he doesn't say, no, we can, well, what if I did this and we can make it not happen? He's like, no, got to kill it all, got to destroy it, and so he's so noble in my mind, and that's how we wanted to write him. And we intentionally wanted to cast an African American, simply because it's like, well, why couldn't an African American be like the smartest guy on the planet? And then that's kind of how we conceived of Dyson. He's just really, really, really super smart guy, an Einstein tech wizard in a way. Oh God, I'm awful with names. Who's the actor that played him?
Joe Morton.
Yeah. He was fantastic. And there's this the scene where he's shot up, and then Arnold's shooting the police cars. They break in, and he's essentially got this kind of electronic plunger device,
Yeah.
And he's holding it, and he's dying, and he knows he's dying. Okay. And as the cops are coming in, he just said, I think of the line is, he just says, I don't know how much longer I can hold this thing. And like, basically, get out of here now, so not only does he destroy his life's work, he willingly sacrifices his own life in the process to save mankind. He's just the most noble character in the film to me. I loved that guy.
And you guys arrived at that quite quickly. There was never a version of this film in which Dyson didn't sacrifice himself. Dyson lived.
No, there was never a version of that. He was. We always knew that that's where it was going to go. Well, because that's part of. I mean, it had to be that way. Otherwise, you open a whole other can of worms. Like, does he go off with them? Does he just? But no, the whole point was that was a closed loop, and intended to be. And then the notion that he would willingly sacrifice himself as well as destroy his entire life's work. That was just so appealing from the standpoint of being a noble human being and the most moral character in the entire film. I think we were just in love with that from the beginning, and kind of knew that that's how he was going to go out.
Of course, that's not the only moment of sacrifice that we'll see as the film begins to really hurtle towards its conclusion here. So first we have this nail-biting escape and this chase sequence, the T-1000 pursuing Sarah and co. in this low-flying helicopter over a freeway. They then crash into this molten steel works. There's a punishing fight scene between the T-1000 and T-800. T-800 is seemingly defeated. There's then this deadly game of cat and mouse, as Sarah and John try to hide from the T-1000. The T-1000 is ultimately destroyed, the T-800 has come back to life to help save the day, after which the T-800 realizes that the only way to make sure that the nuclear apocalypse is truly averted is for his microchip to be destroyed as well, which leads to this emotional, iconic moment, the thumbs up. So, Bill, we talked at the beginning about the emotional possibilities of this movie that you discovered as you guys wrote it, and how surprising that was for audiences following T1. Tell me where that now timeless image came from, the thumbs up.
That sequence changed as we were working on it. And what I initially wanted, as we were talking it out, was that Arnold steps, he had the bit where he goes, I gotta die, essentially. So, and they all kind of very quickly realized that yeah, he's got to go away. And I wanted to do something very simple, which is that he simply steps to the edge of that big vat of molten steel, and Sarah and John Connor are near him, beside him, behind him, and Connor says, "Are you scared?" And Arnold says, "Yes," and immediately jumps into that steel. And I wanted to do that because it's like, let's make him, let's just really reinforce what he's learned and that he's damn near human now, because he has an emotion. And Jim didn't want to do that. That's too simple. I want to make a bigger emotional moment out of it, and he was probably right. And so what we ended up with is what you see in the film, where he says, "You're going to have to lower me. I'm not allowed to self-terminate." And so it's the moment is kind of stretched out, to make it a bigger emotional thing. And I just wanted to have this very simple thing. Yes, I'm scared. Bang, off he goes. And so we ended up with what you see now, which is a much longer kind of emotional goodbye than with a kid. And there was another thing that we never did that I thought would be cool, just again, as we were kicking ideas around early days, is that so Arnold goes in, and the thumbs up might have been a hangover from it's okay, but that's what he's trying to tell the kid. It's okay.
It's such a cool culmination of the relationship that we've seen blossom between those two. You've seeded it all the way through the movie, and the thumbs up scene, to me was always just the ultimate symbol of the way that John has imprinted some of his humanity upon this machine. I love that moment. The thumbs up scene, it is iconic. Hasta la vista, also iconic. These are moments that are now just part of our pop culture. Did you see that coming at all?
I don't think you can ever know that. No, you never know. Hasta la vista just came out of when Jim and I would be on the phone. That's how we'd often hang up. Hasta la vista. We just say it to each other over the years. And so it just seemed like I don't know, just part of our own language. So we just threw that in. The fact that it became, this kind of cultural thing in the zeitgeist, you can never predict that. In fact, I actually believe if you sit down and try to write the coolest line in the world that you just know people are going to be repeating for 20, 30 years, you'll fail. Because I don't think it works like that. People pick up on things, and we knew it was a cool line because the kid had said it to him. So when he repeats it, there's fun in that, right? Like in the first one, "I'll be back." That's a throwaway line. I don't think Jim or anybody ever thought that was going to become, a thing. So I think those things are very, very, very hard to predict, if not impossible.
But it all does go to speak to how timeless this film is. I mean, yes, of course, like Guns N' Roses are on the soundtrack, and a lot of the clothes and haircuts place it in the 90s, but there is something at the heart of this film that just feels as current today as it was then. What do you think it is about this story that you and James told with T2 that helps the movie remain so relevant 30 years on, Bill?
Well, I think because it was intended to be a cautionary tale about the misuse of technology and the weaponization of technology, and the fact that Skynet is this sort of ultimate AI construct. Okay, and I often joke with friends, they'll say it's all your fault, Wisher, I mean, everything that's going on today, right? And it was like, look, it was written as a cautionary tale, not a how-to video. Okay, that was not the point. And now you're seeing, we were just on the very, very, very beginning conceptually of what is becoming very real today, and both in AI and in robotics, and weaponized robotics specifically. And I think that because the film feels predictive because of that, as though, we were onto something. And maybe we were, because you kind of look at the world that's around you and you sort of imagine where it's going to go. And this stuff 30 years ago was like, there weren't even cell phones, I don't believe, or maybe very, very early ones. I don't believe there was an internet. Didn't that happen a little later, a year or two later?
Yeah.
I think the internet started with DARPA, maybe. It was supposed to be a government. And anyway, then it went commercial and worldwide. But where we're going today with these information exchanging monopolies, where they're gathering all this intelligence on you, the CIA and the NSA, not to mention the public government partnerships between places like Google and Facebook and all of that stuff. They're collecting everything. They're collecting this. And it's all going to go, every keystroke you make on a computer, every phone call you make, every electronic thing you do is captured and stored, to the best of my knowledge, primarily in this ever expanding NSA facility in Utah. But we're all being monitored, and now they're making robots that will eventually become soldiers or cops, and what is it? That place in Boston's working on some kind of mechanical dog. And the speed at which all that's going. I mean, Terminator specifically is a killing unit. We're not there, so I hesitate to call them that. But they're like, pre-Terminator robotics is happening, and at some point it's going to become a thing in the world. It's going to go beyond labs and start being integrated into militaries and police forces and stuff. How could it not be? I mean, why the hell else are they working on it? And so I think that people are becoming more and more and more and more aware of all of these things: the collection gathering, the AI, the robotics. And so they'll look back on Terminator 2 especially, it does seem prescient, like we predicted all of this, and I don't think that we were intentionally predicting it. We were kind of hoping it wouldn't happen.
As you say, Bill, artificial intelligence is here now, and a lot of the anxieties that underpinned those first two films, they're just part of the fabric of our world now, which is scary to think. Don't you think it's weird, given that the Terminator franchise isn't firing on all cylinders the way that perhaps it could be? I mean, I don't know, I actually quite enjoyed the most recent film, but on the whole, a lot of these sequels post T2, they've either kind of not worked on a creative level, or they've struggled to find an audience, or both. Why do you think that is?
Jim and I didn't work on them.
A pretentious dick.
And I didn't work on the last one either, even though I didn't produce it. A guy who's become a pretty good friend of mine, Miller, directed it.
Yeah.
And, part of it is, Arnold and Linda are getting on in years now, So I don't know how much longer, if at all, if there's going to be like a Terminator 7. I have no idea if it will be. I don't know that they can continue to be part of it because they're just, none of us are kids anymore. And Arnold is now in his early 70s. So, I really liked the last one too that Tim Miller did. And I like that given, that Linda Hamilton is about 60 and Arnold was probably about 70, 71 when he did it, that they made smart choices, I mean, where would she be today? She'd be a tequila swigging, badass grandma, running around hunting Terminators and trying to kill them. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's Sarah, And then I love what they did with Arnold. He'd been here long enough that he had become very human in a way, like almost autistic, sorta, kinda, but had learned a lot, in the intervening years, and sort of adopted a family and all of that stuff. I thought those were all smart choices. But I think moving forward, to capture audiences worldwide and all of that, whenever theaters reopen, whenever that will be. But for the moment, everything is streaming, so, which is fine. Everyone's got a 60-inch flat screen, it seems like, so, they'll still look good. But they may, I don't know what they're going to do. They may decide to, I think Jim had in mind, with the new characters, as a producer, with the new characters in the latest one, of kind of rebooting the franchise, but also trying to play up Linda and Arnold at the same time, and then kind of pass the baton, to the newer, younger characters. So we'll see. I don't know what they're going to do. Or if it will happen, I don't know. But they probably need to. They probably need to sort of reimagine where it will go from there.
Yeah, I guess it just goes to show the lightning in a bottle that you guys captured with T2. It's not easy to replicate, obviously. Bill, we're running out of time, but the 30th anniversary is right around the corner. What do you say to people who, 3 decades on, still hold this film so dearly? They still find humor in it, they still find horror in it, they still find humanity in it. What's your message to fans?
Give it another look if you've already seen it. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. And just know that this is before it all began. And we were trying to tell people, don't let this happen. And here we are today, and it's starting to be made real. So if you want to see, the first SOS that was thrown out there with a T2.
Oh, man.
Well put. Well, Bill, this has been such a joy. I really appreciate you coming on Script Apart. I guess there's nothing left to say, but thank you, and hasta la vista.
Hasta la vista. It's been a pleasure.
listening to Script Apart, hosted by me, Al Horner, produced by Camel Demek, with music from Stefan Bindley-Taylor. Get in touch. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, or you can email us, thescriptapartpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Pouring a little bit more of my ridiculous triple IPA. It's a pint of 11.25% beer. Fucking hell. Yeah, I'm only having one. One pint of 11%. You are efficiently drinking. Yes.
Hi, I'm Chaz Fisher.
And I'm Stu Willis.
And welcome to Draft Zero, a podcast where two filmmakers try to work out what makes great screenplays work.
And in this episode, we are doing our annual back matter for, well, it's kind of looking forward to 2021 and looking back to the 2020 and all that, whatever that was. I mean, it was an eventful year for Draft Zero on a personal and I guess career and as a podcast thing as well. So we're going to start off by giving an update on Draft Zero, what we did, what we're thinking of doing. We're going to talk about collaborations. Chaz and I, as we've talked about a lot last year in episodes, collaborated on the script, it's gotten some traction. That's all we can really say at this point. But we definitely want to talk about what we've learned from that in broad brushstrokes. We're going to take some listener questions, and we're going to end up with talking about, because we've done it every back matter since Disney started pumping out Star Wars, we want to talk about the Mandalorian Season 2. Yeah, we did talk about Star Wars in an entire episode last year, but we're kind of going to go and revisit The Mandalorian a year later with another season. Yes, we'll be ice skating through a whole bunch of topics, and hopefully it's exciting and fun. And if you decide to stop listening at this point, that is fine. We'll still get the download count, and that's all that matters to us.
Well, look, just for any new listeners out there who aren't familiar with our back matter format, this is an episode where Stu and I finally relinquish the guise of empirical analysis, the mirage of empirical analysis, and actually just allow ourselves to have opinions without evidence. I mean, look, we've always kind of held ourselves, we've tried to rely on empirical evidence because we've gone, look, who are we to tell anyone, like, why should anyone listen to our opinion? But it feels like after doing this podcast for this amount of time and where we're getting to in our careers, it actually feels like, hey, we might be allowed to have an opinion, or I might have more faith in my opinion.
Hey, I don't even listen to your opinion. I don't even know why anyone else would. We put in a project together, and no.
Okay, but first, straight up, let's talk about Draft Zero. I mean, somehow COVID prompted us to do the live isolation episodes, and they were good fun for us. They were good for our mental health, and we hope they help you too. And it also allowed us to bank enough recordings to actually release more Draft Zero more often, which was pretty exciting for us and unexpected. But in terms of, we finally released the Sofia Coppola episode. I think we've been talking about it for 3 years, but it actually, waiting helped it become much better than I think it would have been had we recorded it earlier.
Yeah, I think in the end it was a really good episode. I know Ben Mizzy, friend of the podcast, was like, that's a spicy episode. And I've been avoiding speaking to him, so because I'm afraid to hear what he means by that.
Yeah. At the moment, spicy fantasy sounds excellent.
They could be like, "Whoa, guys, get a room."
In terms of what we have in the bank still to come out is we've got a really great run, I feel, of 3 different episodes analysing 3 films and how they use interweaving timelines as a narrative structure.
And I think what's interesting is like it did feel a little bit indulgent to break it into 3 episodes. I mean, they're hopefully shorter than usual episodes. It's just releasing 1 4-hour episode just seemed insane, unless it was Stephen Cleary, or even 4.5 hours or whatever the fuck it was going to be. But what is interesting is it really raises a whole bunch of questions and discussions about narrative point of view, how we feel about characters, and kind of us looking at words on the page with the scripts. We're once again going to be joined by Mel Killingsworth, who in the last year has guested with us multiple times. She kind of feels like, as we said, like the Eileen Brosh McKenna of Giraffe Zero. I like it because she does most of the homework, which actually pushes us. She pushes us to kind of do more work, which is good.
And argues with us and helps us select, I think, a more interesting array of films. So, I mean, you and I it'll be interesting to see if Mel listens to this episode, because we've discussed bringing her on almost as a permanent host. So this will test, like, if she doesn't listen to this episode and doesn't raise it with us, then she's fired.
Or as Lucasfilm just did to Gina, she's just no longer in. Just don't invite her back. Well, those contract negotiations fell over. That's weird. Contract negotiations. But I think before you're going to go into that, because it's definitely be interesting to see how people feel about that, I do want to say I am incredibly indebted to all the Patreons we've had over the last year. It's obviously been very difficult for a lot of people, and we know that some people had to pull back their support from Draft Zero because their financial circumstances very understandably changed. But what is so fascinating to me and means so much is we've actually now have more patrons than we've ever had before. So there's a bunch of people that reach in their pockets, and maybe it's because they found us and they were comforted during, their various forms of lockdown or whatever it is. We now got more patrons than we've ever had. So thank you to everyone that signed up recently, and thank you to everyone that if they've had to leave for whatever reason, or they just set themselves a mental limit for what to support, for how much to support. Thank you so much for doing it. It means the world to us. It keeps them going, and it makes our life. It really does mean that we can get our Drive Zero out more quickly. It means we switched our editing platform to Premiere, and part of that means that we've got Dropbox that we share between all of us. So Chris, who edits the majority of our episodes, Chaz and myself all have the same files in a Dropbox, so we can pick it up and make changes and do things. It pays for Orphonic, which does our mixing. It pays for a whole bunch of small tools. We use this thing called Setup, which means that Chris, Chaz, and I all have the same kind of tool set for doing things like grabbing YouTube files, doing OCR and PDFs, which is a weird thing, but it's something that is actually really useful to us, that we can
And finance sponsorships. This is not going to be an ongoing thing. As far as I'm aware, we're going to take it on a case-by-case basis. But for those of you who hate advertising in your podcast, please know that we did poll our Patreons and got their blessing through silence to accept.
No one had a problem with it, right? And that meant that we could get Carissa. She's an actor who makes a living from acting, and she's also an academic, so it means that we could pay her to do those readings, which are really valuable. We could pay Chris to do an edit, so the sponsorship allowed us to have a higher production value podcast. And look, we may revisit what we were thinking. We've stopped doing the kind of episode summary guides, which are fantastic. I really like them, but they were a lot of work, and we didn't seem to get a lot of traction of it, but they were like bullet points overviews. But if people sign up to Patreon and go, I really would love a 1 or 2 page handout summary of these episodes, we can do that. We've also had a couple of people excited that we're putting more and more episodes out on YouTube, because there's a language thing, because we've actually got a surprising amount of, surprising to us, relative to the rest of the world, it shouldn't be surprising. There's a lot of people who listen to us that English is not their first language, right? And having it on YouTube means they can read the transcripts, but there is also, for those who don't know, on our website, we've got generated transcripts that we generate that will play. They're often hilariously inaccurate, but they will play at the same time as you watch the episode. And in fact, you can search in the player for specific parts of the podcast. And, and if you want those to be better quality, again, sign up to the Patreon and make your voice heard, and we can kind of retool some money to do that if people find it valuable. But maybe they don't.
I mean, look, hopefully what listeners can hear is that any money that comes into us goes back into production. Like, everyone gets paid except for you and I on Drop Zero.
Paid is an absolutely the wrong word. Chris, for a period of time, was giving almost like one-fifth of, like 20% of what we were paying him as a patron.
Bless Chris.
He probably goes like, hang on, that's a scam, guys. Rather than being interested in a pay rise, I'll just cancel my patronage. I'm going to get thanked anyway. You are, Chris. Thank you. So I think this kind of leads us to an update about whether and this is a conversation between Jazz and I as much as the audience. It's less an announcement. Because I think one of the things that we found last year is we had some really positive response to only focusing on one film, right? And this is an argument that's been through Chaz and I have had for a while, right? Which is like, our episodes are too long, how do we make them more digestible? And, maybe we break them up per film, and we're trialing that with the series you're going to hear soon about parallel timelines, that we're going to do an episode per film. And maybe we'll continue doing kind of more focused one film analysis, adding more of them, because they're kind of easier for us to do.
I mean, we go into more depth as well. So, look, it's going to be on a topic-by-topic basis, I guess. Like, I still think there's value in some of the topics we had, like introducing characters where we did 20 films, or world building where we did 20 films, because we're only looking at the first few moments of something rather than whole screenplays or whole stories. But after we've got that run of films, and we've also got there's an amazing, one of the live installations was actually on pitch decks and visual pitching materials, and obviously an audio format on visual pitching materials won't be as great as the YouTube version. But I think there was a lot of the early discussion before we actually started breaking down examples that could be of value. So, and it would be a nice compliment to the 3 episodes we did on Stephen Cleary in like development tools for selling as well, because pitch decks is obviously a very natural extension of that, and Mark was really insightful.
And we are going to release the criminally underseen, that's just my running gag, underseen episode of Watchmen. We're going to take out the stuff from that was in-depth discussion of given circumstances and try to release that, see if that will work as a standalone episode. And if that inspires people to then go and watch the full 2.5-hour podcast, great. They may then decide just to watch my breakdowns comparing the comic book with Zack Snyder's interpretation, framed side by side. Cool. But that's definitely on the cards, but we're not necessarily guaranteeing when we're releasing them, because what's great about having this backlog is we can kind of move it around. Because, Stephen Cleary might be like, hey guys, I actually managed to get into Australia and I finished my, I'm in quarantine for 2 weeks. Let's do a podcast recording, and then we might, do something with Stephen or whatever. We do want to still be reactive. But it does lead us to the idea of what are we kind of interested in talking about? And normally we're like, we'll go and lead a poll, but I think there's some value in kind of talking about the things that are interesting to us at the moment as writers, because that's really what it comes down to. It's like us, as much as about us scratching our own itch, as giving the audience what they want. So, some of the ideas that we talked about doing is one of the ones that is at the top of the.
Oh my God. My tailbone. What? Sounds like this douchebag wants to cancel his sale. It's fine with me.